All right, today I have a special guest with me here. Obviously, we did a China video a couple weeks ago that got a few million views on a lot of content, so I wanted to go a little bit deeper. We reached out to General Robert Spalding, who wrote a book called Stealth War: How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. I literally couldn't put this book down, and once you read it as well, we'll put the link below, you'll know exactly why. He was the former senior director of strategy at the National Security Council, and he was kind enough to fly out to Dallas for us to have this conversation together about US, China, 5G, and a lot of other technical issues that have to do with that. Having said that, thanks for coming out. Appreciate you for making the time.
Thanks for having me. Great
Yes,
to be here.
so let's get right into it. So going into China, what is your journey of you becoming a general at the Air Force, and then from there being part of National Security Council? How did that go about?
I came into the Air Force before I really knew much about the military, and my picture of the military was about peeling potatoes and somebody yelling at you, essentially Gomer Pyle. And I saw the movie Top Gun, and it fascinated me and really got me excited. So I joined and just went in with no expectations, just had fun and really just worked hard, but also played hard. But I wanted to fly jets, and that was what got me started. And one thing led to another. I had an opportunity 2 years before I was supposed to leave the service to go live in China, and so I took it. And the rest is kind of history, because when I made that fateful decision, and it was really about thinking about what opportunity I had to go live abroad, but also how strategic China was in our future. It really opened doors for me that, quite frankly, I would have never considered. I even had no clue about. So,
Literally, so there was no plans of that happening?
There was no plans. There was really no plans. In fact, I didn't want a career in the Air Force, so I didn't look to become a general. In fact, when my wife heard that I had made it, she laughed.
Why is that? That you made it as a general?
Like, how could you make that?
Because
that
for
rank?
me, I was an E4 in the military, in the Army. When we saw generals, we would shiver. It's like, this is a general,
Right, this is a big deal. But for me, it was, just having fun serving my country.
It's pretty wild how you think of it that way. Yeah, it's pretty wild how you think of it. What is the percentage of people becoming generals? It's minuscule. It's very, very small. To see that star on the Humvee or whatever you're being driven around, that's pretty unique to have that. But what year was it when you went to China? I'm curious.
So first time it was 2002. So I actually went to language training at Monterey, the Defense Language Institute.
DLI?
Studied China for 52 weeks. It's a 62-week course. I left in 52 weeks in June of 2002. Steph and I and our two boys went in the country and lived in Shanghai, in Pudong, on the east side of the city, and that's the side that the Communist Party built up in the 90s, so that's where the Jinmao building is and a lot of the financial district of Shanghai. And we just traveled the country and lived with the people, and it was probably one of the most phenomenal 2 years of my life.
It was a phenomenal experience.
It was incredible. The people were great. They're hardworking, resilient people, and having learned the language before I got there, I could communicate and really travel all over and really got to know how they think. And in a lot of ways, not really fully understanding what was going on. I don't think you can live in China and fully understand what it is to be Chinese. But for me, as an outsider looking at that country, it was exciting, and it was a place that I wanted to be. And so when I left in 2004, I told Stephanie that, hey, when I retire from the Air Force, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to start a business and get wealthy.
That was the plan, to want to come back.
That was the plan.
Now, what's your rank at that time when you were there in 2002?
So when I got there, I had just made major. So
you were already.
I'd been in 10 years at the time.
You had been in 10 years. You were major.
Right.
And what was your job? What were you doing in China for U.S.?
So the Olmsted program, which is a program that I was selected for, essentially picks 3 officers from each branch of the service and sends them to language school. It's not for you to go into a country that has English as a national language, but a foreign language, and so and then sends you in the country for 2 years. And I went to a university in Shanghai, Tongji University, and studied MBA courses, and really it was about getting to know the people. It was really becoming immersed in what it was to understand China, the Chinese culture and history and the language.
So does China know that you're going in as a major? Is that a something that it's a basic open conversation? Hey, we're sending one of our majors from Air Force to spend a couple years with you?
One of the great things about the Olmsted Scholar Program is that you do everything on your own. So once you're accepted into the program and you go to language training, it's upon your responsibility to go and get accepted into university, to apply for a visa, because they want you to understand what it takes to travel to a foreign country. And so it's almost like being on a sabbatical. You don't have a detailer that you're talking to. You're basically cut loose on your own recognizance to go and figure it out.
But you're getting paid, so the military
still getting paid.
Okay.
It is really an incredible opportunity, because you're really learning, because you don't have a lot of support. You're out there by yourself, trying to figure it out. And there was, how do I get there, become a student, get a student visa, but also how do I get my family in there, and how do I make sure that so we had to take them out of country every 60 or every 90 days to 6 months to renew the visa and come back in.
So China didn't know you were there and you were a major.
They didn't. I was not there in an official capacity.
I wasn't there on
an official visa or on a diplomatic passport. I was there on basically a tourist passport with a student visa, going to a university. Now, when I met Chinese, I would tell them, hey, I'm in the Air Force, I'm a B-2 pilot. Of course, they thought that was quite strange that I would be there, but
That's exactly what I would be thinking about, because from what you read on culture, you sense a certain level of, not paranoia or suspicious, but why are you here? What do you do? Are you a spy? You'd look like a CIA guy. I mean, if you go there, I'd look at you saying maybe you are working and you're trying to gather intel to bring you back, but that was actually not the case.
But this was 2002 to 2004, and what was happening there, if you remember, China just entered the WTO, so it was breakneck speed to grow the country and grow the economy. Mm-hmm. And all of my neighbors were there building factories for Fortune 100 companies, and so there was a lot less scrutiny on me as a military guy. I think it was the country at the time was focused on making money, and certainly people found out who I was, but I didn't get a lot of scrutiny.
That's good to hear that they didn't do anything. Now, the second time you went back was what year?
The second time I went back was in December of 2016, and that was to be the defense attaché in Beijing.
And this time around, this is a little bit more public. They know a little bit more that you're going, or still same situation?
No, this is definitely, I am the senior defense official representing the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs to the Chinese military, the People's Liberation Army in Beijing. And so for example, I got there a week before they took the UUV. I don't know if you remember, but they took one of our underwater gliders in the South China Sea. Essentially while one of our ships was trying to retrieve it. And so there was a big
controversy.
There was a big diplomatic controversy, and that was beginning to be a crisis. And I was the one that negotiated the return with the People's Liberation Army of that glider mm-hmm. to the U.S.
What was the biggest difference you felt culturally and spirit from 0204 to December 2016?
I never saw a guy with a gun when I was there from 2000 to 2004. When I got back in 2016, there were people with guns at the subway stops. Not all of them, but they were there. And you could definitely feel a palpable change in kind of the tone of the country. Now, some of that may be because it's not Shanghai, it's Beijing, which is the nation's capital. But clearly, things were a heck of a lot more tense when I had been there in 2002 to 2000. Just a completely, in my mind, different vibe.
What, from your experience, and what obviously to write a book like this specific to China, you've had to do a lot of research to be able to write what you've written here. Do you think a part of that happened where they are now growing up to the point where they're not growing up, that's maybe a bad word, they're becoming a bigger, GDP-wise, they grew, to being at a higher number than what they were before. They're becoming a little bit more competitive. 2008 Olympics, it was a statement, they're opening, so hey, we are here to compete. Do you think a part of that is also their level of confidence to know that we can compete with everybody? Let's be a little bit more cautious and protective of what we're trying to build? So look out there, or that was just a different city for you?
Well, no, I think there's a couple of things. One, the Communist Party, was really concerned about corruption. If you go back to 1989, the Tiananmen massacre, the three things that the Chinese Communist Party learned during that time was, one, the Communist Party was under attack by elements within China in league with the United States. Two, that openness was great for globalization in terms of science and technology and economics and finance, but in terms of ideology, they needed to pour a whole lot more into what they were doing in order to prevent their population from becoming democratized. And three, if the party ever became separated from the people, that the party would fail. And you can see that there's a definite paranoia on the part of the party in terms of not wanting to make sure that while their people are very advanced in terms of the technology and the business models with regard to the e-economy, they're very cautious about that kind of getting out of control. And so I think, they are still, in their minds, perfecting their ability to control people, but at the same time, they're concerned about, at any moment, this thing could become unraveled. So it creates this kind of,
They really believe that.
They really believe that, that it could, at any moment, the party could essentially lose control because the population essentially awakes, and so I think it plays into that paranoia.
Yeah. So are they more concerned internally for it to collapse, or somebody from the outside to come and penetrate and confuse them and divide, from within?
I think it's a combination. It's a combination of internally in terms of do they have legitimacy in the eyes of the people, and then what are some things that might, in their minds, confuse the people in terms of, democracy or human rights or civil liberties.
So with you now being who you are, and you were with the National Security Council, Senior Director of Strategy, you've written this book, it's very obvious on who you are and what your position is at. Is someone like you able to go back with no issues? Like, would you be comfortable saying, I'm going to take my family to China?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
No.
Why is that?
Well, because clearly what I say in that book is that the Communist Party is not great for the Chinese people, and that's not something that they appreciate. People like me saying, certainly the way that you become a China expert in the United States is that you go to China. In order to go to China, that you say things that actually the Communist Party doesn't get angry about. And so they may not even give me a visa, but even if they were to give me a visa, I would be concerned that I would go there and they would find some reason to not let me go back.
Not let you come back here.
Right.
Even though, today would be a good time to actually keep you if you went over there. So if you have any plans of staying in China, you may want to go.
I don't want to go for a long vacation.
So
let me go back to something you said, because the other thing that really happened, and you mentioned 2008, and it's important because it's not only the paranoia that they have, but also if you go back to Deng Xiaoping and what he said about hiding capability and biding time. Mm-hmm. This is not a change in what the Communist Party, who they are. It's really in 2008 when our financial system essentially said that we really don't know how to run global finance, that they really believed that they had arrived. And so there's also an element of they've been, having to play second fiddle based on the century of humiliation and the fact that, they were the dominant society for 5,000 years. They had 100 years of bad luck, and now they're back on top. They're ready now to essentially take a leading role in the international system. So, part of that goes with not just, that vibe is not just with how they treat their population, but also how they treat the West, how they treat foreigners, because there is an element that says we're not going to back down anymore. We're going to stand up for what we believe, and we're going to make a name for ourselves in the international order, and we're going to fight to have our interests respected.